Welcome back to another outdoor philosophy here on Switched to Linux. We're under a pavilion because it's been imminent sprinkling on and off today. I didn't want to try and record out in the total rain. I'm going to try and stay put so the lighting doesn't go back and forth a little bit. And this should be a little bit shorter of a video. We're talking about the chapter 8 in Building a Bridge to the 18th Century, and this is the chapter on democracy. And one of the things I found about the chapter is it's not nearly as concise or laid out or even poignant as the other chapters. It's kind of like he needed to include democracy, but he didn't quite know what to say or how to say it. There's some overarching principles that we'll get to, which are in alignment with his view, but at the same token, it's not one where it is. It's just not quite as clear and concise and laid out. Of course, in democracy, we're not specifically talking about politics in the terms of Republicans or Democrats or things, but how we as a society organize ourselves and work together and establish our laws, our rule of law, or whatever that happens to be. And that's kind of the important part. So, of course, there's always things that go back to, the biggest model is the Greeks. And he, in places here, questions, appropriately so, is a model for a few thousand people in a small civilization appropriate for us today, with this how big we have, as many land masses, and even the cultural air. But at the same time, he points out the Greeks meant by democracy is quite different from the meanings today. Aristotle, for example, tells us to elect magistrates is oligarchic, while to choose them by lot is democratic. And in reality, I think he's probably right, and we need to go back to that view maybe where we are selecting people at random rather than election. Because if you look at our last election, 50% of the country hates at least one of those and is completely violent towards one of those candidates. I mean, not violent, physical violence, but certainly is violent in the means of a good example, as of right now, a bunch of activists basically spammed the term idiot in Google search, and if you type in idiot, you see pictures of President Trump. Okay? The problem is, and the reason I bring this up, is we had zero good options. I voted for Trump because, frankly, I think Hillary is closer to the Antichrist. Okay? A lot of people think Trump's closer to the Antichrist, and Hillary, well, at least, isn't Trump. And that's kind of the problem we have in our world right now, is we had a 50-50 option, and yes, there's third-party candidates, and when one of them could even possibly remotely come close to winning an election, I'll think about voting for them. Those are in there as a farce. There's nothing. That's why we need to completely do away with the current political system that we have, because we had no good options. It was, to quote Aristotle, oligarchical. Okay? And for the last few elections, it's been exactly 50-50. And that's a danger zone, because it means that our country is so polarized that, and it is polarized, our country has too much polarization. So he starts engaging in this topic of democracy. And basically, even in a voting structure in Rome where we take our model from, it was only the elites that were able to vote at all anyway. And so with the elites able to vote, then what would end up happening is, women, slaves, farmers, any workers couldn't vote at all anyway. And so the laws and the elections and everything passed exclusively by the merits of the elite. And that is, by sheer definition, an oligarchy. And that's really, America itself right now is either an oligarchy or it is a corporatocracy. And there's a lot of overlap between those two definitions. Okay? And that's one of the things he talks about. And so I think that he realizes and recognizes this as a challenge, and this becomes part of what is the largest challenge in all of this. Because he really goes through and doesn't have a whole lot to say. Like, I read through this chapter twice to try and grasp at what he was understanding. So I think what we want to do is, I even debated about if I even wanted to do a video on this chapter at all, because it's very disjointed compared to everything else. There's a few key points. Obviously, the biggest one that he was making is the democratic process, as we knew before, had a whole lot more to do with the written word or the spoken word. It was a more slow culture where the readers were really the ones with a lot of the influence in the society. And with that happening, what has occurred is we have this major shift where we move from books, which are essentially, he describes books as time capsules of thoughts and ideas. And that's what they are. The printing press enabled the time capsule where people could take their ideas and their thoughts, and for the first time in a while, put them into, we could put them into a package system, and that would stay pretty much unaltered for years. And that's kind of an interesting thing. And so I debate this among believers that I know at times about Christianity and things and our current church model. You know, back a long time ago, the only way a person would really learn a lot about the Bible is to go into a church and listen to the pastor talk. Well, if our objective of church is fellowship with each other and fellowship with God and all this, is sitting there in a room with a group of people isolated, not being able to talk or communicate while one guy talks, is that really fellowship? It's an interesting question to ask, and we can ask it on my other channel. And so it raises this question of, is our model of faith, is our model of presidential debates, is our model of all this stuff outdated, or is it not? That was kind of part of the question that Postman is getting at here. And ultimately, he's going to come down to this idea that, do we have, with how fast the media moves, how polarized it can be, how easy it is to publish anything you want, is it actually important what is in the printed culture, or is it more important to ask what is truth in this world? Learning the skill of parsing out what is true and what is false is a major lost art in our day. We can tell by the amount of things that are just completely false garbage just spreading all over social media. And I'm not going to go out and say fake news, because frankly, fake news, as its own definition, seems to be anything that the established media doesn't like. And that's not right either, because a lot of times what the established media is doing is less true than what's actually occurring. I'm more inclined to trust somebody on the ground in the region where that occurs than I am to trust Fox News or CNN or CNN, or anybody else for that matter. And so it raises this interesting question: what is truth? And in the day where things were written down, even our laws are written down, whether or not we have read them is a different question. In a written culture, you can place things down in a greater understanding, but in our modern day, it's too fluid. And so it asks this question about democracy, which of course democracy itself is the rule of law in the civilized world. In this rule of law in our civilized world, what really is the truth or the reality? All right. Of course, he writes here, most of the new media, like the printed word, are private in the sense they do not require a community context. We see movies at home, frequently alone. We watch television in the same way. We listen to the radio and music, largely alone. We send and receive email messages alone. It seems that now we even go bowling alone. This trend towards an isolist and isolationist culture where we're not interacting, we're not engaging. And that was the original part of democracy, is to discuss, to debate. There was some compromise. There was things going on back and forth, but I don't even see much compromise in Washington anymore. And so maybe our entire country system is out of date. I don't know. Like I said, that kind of brings us to the end of it. The chapter itself was very disorganized. I'm hoping that the last chapter brings it right back. I think it will. The next chapter is on education. But kind of my take-home thoughts on that chapter, reading it twice and still not completely grasping everything he's talking about, everything he's trying to talk about, it just seems a lot more disorganized. The basic take-home messages for me is learn how to evaluate. In fact, this is a statement he does make in there. I didn't cover it just here, but he says now it's not about do we have the information, it's about parsing out the information that is correct. That's really where the difference is. We see that in the nutrition world. The nutrition world is so full of conflicting information. It asks this fascinating question: what is right? What is right? What is true? Is it go with all carbs and cut all fat, or is it cut all carbs and go all fat? Realize that there's books talking about both of those. And that's one of the points that he does make in this world of excessive, fast-growing information, where information is all around us. It's not as much do we have access to information, it's do we have the skill set to parse out what is true in the information we have. And that's the thing that I would say is the take-home, and how that relates to democracy is you have to understand what the reality is before you can make a law, establish a law, or keep a law, or even elect our officials to do those laws on our behalf. So that's kind of my thought on the democracy. Hopefully that was a good enough video. And if you've read that chapter, tell me if did you get the same sense that I did, that it seemed a lot more disorganized than the rest of the book. We didn't have as clear, concise questions. We didn't have clear, concise, specific challenges, evolutions, and solutions. We just didn't see that in this particular chapter. So it was kind of interesting. So thanks for watching this Outdoor Philosophy. Don't forget to check out the ways you can help support the channel if you are so inclined to do so. SwitchedToLinux.com/support. A reminder, this is going to be the last book in Outdoor Philosophy on this channel. Outdoor Philosophy is going to be moving to my other channel, the Christian channel. It's going to remain mostly the way it is. I'm not going to make it overly Christian, but enough people like this series to keep it going, but it's I want to move it off of the Linux channel for now. So just an FYI, if you have not subscribed yet to our Walk in Christ YouTube channel, that's where it's going to be after this. So I believe it's going to be the next chapter. It's going to be the last one on this channel, and then we're going to be moving the whole series over to the other channel for next time. But check out for now, SwitchedToLinux.com/support. You can pick up a t-shirt like this one here. Just sub to the cat, the human is crazy, at shop.switchedtolinux.com, and check me out on Patreon, patreon.com/TomM. So thank you for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.